Most women have no idea they are doing it, and most men have no idea how much it is quietly destroying everything. My name is Miss Anna, and welcome back to Anna Talks Relationships. Today we are talking about female disrespect in relationships, and I want both the men and the women watching to pay close attention, because this one affects everyone. Let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand is that disrespect is rarely a single event. It does not usually show up one day out of nowhere fully formed and obvious. It builds, it starts small, and the smaller it starts, the easier it is to miss. The technical way to say this is that covert disrespect almost always comes before overt disrespect. Covert disrespect is the low-level stuff, the behaviors that have just enough plausible deniability that you can brush them off in the moment. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe she did not mean it like that. That is exactly what makes it dangerous. Because if you do not address the small stuff does not stay small. It grows. And by the time it is obvious enough that nobody can pretend otherwise, the damage is already deep. The clearest place to watch this process play out is not in romantic relationships. It is in high schools and prisons. A bully does not walk up to someone on day one and go straight to the most aggressive version of what he wants to do. That is actually a risky move. He does not know who he is dealing with yet. He does not know how that person is going to respond. Pick the wrong target and the whole thing blows up in his face. So instead he tests. The classic example is the hallway bump. He crosses paths with someone and bumps into them. Not hard enough to be an obvious provocation, just enough to see what happens. Because there is plausible deniability built right into it. Oh, sorry, did not see you there. It happens, people bump into each other. Now here is where it gets interesting. If the person who got bumped says, "Excuse me," they have just told the bully everything he needed to know. That person is now a target. Because that response communicated that the person is not going to push back. They absorbed it and apologized. But if that same person stops, looks the bully dead in the eye, and makes it very clear without even saying a word that that was not okay, the bully has a decision to make. And most of the time, he backs off. He might say something like, "Whoa, relax, what is your problem?" But internally, he has recalibrated. He knows this is not going to be as easy as he thought. Now, here is the thing. Most bullies know they are bullies. They are doing this deliberately. They know exactly what they are testing for. But I want to make a distinction that I think is really important when we are talking about women and disrespect in relationships. Because a lot of women who are being disrespectful are not doing it on purpose. They are not sitting there calculating how to undermine their partner. They genuinely may not realize that what they are doing is landing as disrespect. And a big reason for that is that respect means something different to men than it does to women. The way women experience disrespect and the way men experience disrespect are not the same thing. So a woman can be doing something that feels completely normal or even harmless to her, and her partner is receiving it as a direct attack on his sense of worth. That gap in perception is where a lot of relationship damage quietly accumulates. Now, before we go further, if this video is hitting home for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That is genuinely how this channel grows, and it means more people get access to conversations like this one. All right, I want to give the women watching a very simple test, one question, and it will tell you almost everything you need to know about whether a behavior is likely to land as disrespectful to a man. Here it is. Would I say the same thing in the same way to my boss if I wanted to keep my job? That is it. Just sit with that question for a second. Would you roll your eyes at your boss? Would you wave off your boss's feedback like it was not worth your time? Would you respond to a reasonable request from your boss with sarcasm? Would you complain loudly and angrily when your boss asked you to do something? Would you go to your coworkers and talk negatively about your boss behind his back? Would you ignore your boss mid-sentence? Would you mock your boss for trying to maintain standards? Would you mutter under your breath every time your boss spoke in a meeting? Would you make it obvious through your body language that you found your boss boring, irrelevant, or beneath you? I think we all know the answer. No, because we understand instinctively that those behaviors carry a cost in a professional environment. We know how they would be received. We know they communicate something specific about how much we value the relationship and the person. Now, I know some of you are already thinking, okay, but I actually do joke around with my boss. We have a playful dynamic. I tease him sometimes and it is totally fine. Okay, but let me ask you this. Would you act that same way with your boss in front of his clients, in front of people who are not part of your inside dynamic? Of course not, because you understand that to an outside observer, that behavior reads differently. You already know that context matters. You already know that certain behaviors carry a specific message regardless of your intention, which means you understand the point I am making. Now, I want to address the pushback I know is coming, because every time I have this conversation, someone says some version of this: that is nice, but a man is not my boss. And you are right, he is not. But here is the thing, your actual boss is not your boss in that sense either. He cannot make you do anything. You are not his property. You are a participant in a voluntary professional relationship, one that you chose to enter. And within that relationship, you agreed to operate inside a certain structure. The person who built that structure, who set the terms, who created the frame you are operating inside, has a legitimate kind of authority within that context. Not over you as a person, but over the role you voluntarily agreed to play. And usually in relationships, it is the man who builds that frame. It is the man who extended the invitation. It is the man who made the offer for the woman to enter his life. That is not always the case, but it usually is. And if that framing still does not sit right with you, then here is another way to look at it. If you genuinely believe your boss deserves more respectful treatment than your partner does, that is actually a really important piece of information. It tells you something about how you rank those relationships. And maybe for you, that ranking is accurate. Maybe your professional life really does matter more to you than your intimate one right now. No judgment. But if that is not what you intend to communicate, you need to know that the behavior is communicating it anyway, because men pick up on it, even when they cannot name it, even when they do not say anything about it in the moment. They feel it, and it accumulates. So let us talk about why this actually matters. Why does disrespecting men create a problem for women? There are two reasons. The first one is fairly straightforward. Any man who has genuine self-worth and options is not going to stay in a relationship where he is consistently disrespected. Or he might not leave immediately, he might tolerate it for a while, but over time, a man who knows his value and who has alternatives is going to either address it directly or he is going to distance himself. Emotionally first, then physically. And the woman may not even see it coming because the covert disrespect she was putting out never felt like a big deal to her. It was just how she communicated. It was just her personality. She was just being real. But from his side of the relationship, it has been building for months. And at a certain point, a man with options does a quiet calculation and decides the cost is too high. That is the obvious reason. But the second reason is the one I really want you to sit with. Because this one is not about him. It is about her. Disrespect does not just threaten the relationship. It threatens her own emotional experience of the relationship. Here is why. It is not possible for a woman to genuinely love a man she does not respect. I want to be careful here because I am not saying it is impossible for a woman to love a man who does not deserve respect. That happens constantly. Women stay in relationships with men who have given them every reason to leave. That is a different conversation. What I am saying is this. For a woman, love and respect are not separate. They move together. Where the respect goes, the love follows. A man can love a woman he does not respect. That also happens every day. But for women, the architecture is different. Respect is load-bearing. If it goes, everything built on top of it starts to shift. This is one of the most significant differences between how men and women experience romantic attachment, and it has a very practical implication. Every time a woman disrespects her partner, she is not just chipping away at his experience of the relationship. She is chipping away at her own. She is quietly eroding the foundation of her own feelings. She might not notice it right away, but over time, the attraction fades. The warmth fades. What was once genuine affection starts to feel more like obligation or habit, and she will often interpret that shift as evidence that he is the problem. He is not exciting anymore. He is not the man she fell for. Something changed. But what actually changed is that the respect left first, and the love followed it out the door. Now for the men watching. This is why addressing disrespect early is not optional if you are serious about the long-term health of your relationship. It is not about ego. It is not about demanding to be treated a certain way because you need validation. It is about protecting the conditions that allow the relationship to actually work. The early attraction, the warmth, the loyalty, none of that sustains itself automatically. It requires conditions. And one of the core conditions is that the man maintains a baseline of genuine respect in the relationship. If covert disrespect is allowed to go unchecked, two things happen simultaneously. The behavior escalates, because unchallenged behavior always expands. If there is no consequence, there is no reason to stop. And at the same time, her internal experience of the relationship quietly deteriorates. The two things feed each other. More disrespect means less respect, means less love, means less investment, means more disrespect. It is a cycle, and it almost never corrects itself on its own. Now I want to talk about what addressing it actually looks like, because a lot of men hear this and they think addressing disrespect means getting loud, getting aggressive, issuing ultimatums, or having a big confrontation. That is not what this is. The most effective response to covert disrespect is calm, direct, and immediate, not explosive, not delayed, right there in the moment, the equivalent of the warning glance in the hallway. You do not need a speech. You do not need to build a case. You do not need to explain yourself at length. You just need to make it clear, calmly, and without drama, that what just happened was not okay. And then you move on. No lecture, no sulking, no bringing it up 3 days later, in the moment clearly, and then done. That kind of response does two things. It sets a boundary without making a scene, and it actually protects her investment in the relationship, because the man who lets everything slide is not the man she is going to respect 6 months from now. The man who calmly and consistently holds his standard is. This is counterintuitive for a lot of women to hear, because a lot of women have been told that a good partner accommodates, that the measure of a healthy relationship is how much you are willing to overlook, that getting upset about something small means you are insecure or controlling. But that framing does not hold up when you look at what actually produces sustained attraction and genuine love in women over the long term. It is not unlimited tolerance. It is consistent, calm, grounded standards. A man who holds his standard respectfully and without drama is a man who is easy to respect. And a man who is easy to respect is a man who is easy to love. That is not a trick. That is just how the psychology works. Now let me bring this back to the women, because this conversation is not just for the men. If you are in a relationship right now, I want you to honestly ask yourself whether the way you communicate with your partner would hold up against that boss test. Not the letter of it, not technically, but honestly. Do you roll your eyes? Do you respond with sarcasm when he brings something up? Do you dismiss what he says before he finishes saying it? Do you vent to your friends about him in ways that would embarrass him if he heard them? Do you undercut him in front of other people? None of these things feel catastrophic in isolation, but they compound. And the damage they do is not just to him, it is to your own capacity to stay genuinely attracted to and connected with the person you are building a life with. The relationship you want, the one where you feel safe and loved and genuinely chosen, that relationship requires a foundation of mutual respect. And that foundation does not build itself. It is constructed deliberately through consistent behavior in both directions. So if you have been operating on autopilot and some of what I have said today landed for you, that awareness is actually the most valuable thing you can walk away with, because you cannot change what you cannot see, and now you can see it. That is it for today. Let me know in the comments what came up for you while you were watching this. Whether you are a man or a woman, I want to hear your experience with this. If you made it this far, go ahead and subscribe, because there is a lot more of this kind of conversation coming. My name is Miss Anna, and I will see you in the next one.